Welcome to Second Take, the show where Africa's contradictions come dressed in uniform, necktie, or hashtag, depending on the scandal of the week. We don't mock the continent, we interrogate its comedy. We honor her resilience by asking why her brightest lights are often switched off by the very hands sworn to keep them on. This week, we journey through 5 nations, performing democracy with the enthusiasm of bad actors reading a divine script. In South Africa, a police general commits the unspeakable sin of honesty. In Nigeria, a minister turns forgery into innovation. In Madagascar, the president promises electricity but delivers deja vu. In Tanzania, a diplomat disappears faster than a government promise. And in Tunisia, a Facebook post nearly earns a firing squad. Each story is a sermon on power's favorite addiction: denial. Across the continent, citizens rise, fall, laugh, and curse under the same sun, while leaders audition for history's least flattering chapter. But don't mistake cynicism for despair. Satire is our rebellion, and laughter is Africa's most ancient weapon. So breathe, listen, and prepare. Because tonight, we're not watching Africa fail. We're watching her wake up again through the noise of those who still refuse to hear her. Welcome to Second Take. South Africa's crime dramas usually involve Netflix and bad accents. But this time, the plot came straight from the police commissioner's mouth. No subscription required. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, KwaZulu-Natal's top cop, did the unthinkable in July this year. He broke the sacred brotherhood of silence and told Parliament that corruption hadn't infiltrated the state. It had practically redecorated it. In a country where task team often means funeral planning committee, his revelation that an executive order dissolved the political killings task team was like confessing that the fire brigade is allergic to water. He warned that criminal networks had wormed into government offices like termites with ID cards, suggesting the only thing separating politicians from gangsters was better tailoring. From that point on, reality turned into a tragic comedy. Mkhwanazi didn't just hint at corruption, he mapped it like a GPS system for criminals. Criminal networks weren't lurking in dark alleys. They were in meetings, approving budgets, signing memos, and drinking tea with ministers or Hennessy. One could attend a government briefing and be unsure if they were in Parliament or a syndicate's boardroom. Citizens had known it for years. But hearing it from the police commissioner gave them a satisfying mixture of vindication and, quite frankly, horror. Julius Malema, normally a tornado of theatrics, nodded in acknowledgement. Not a shout, not a speech, just a nod. The public blinked. Even opposition leaders occasionally recognize courage when it's staring them in the face. Malema's nod was layered. Part respect, part political strategy, of course, part subtle mockery of everyone else who had been too scared or too comfortable to speak up. In Parliament, the bureaucrats, they shuffled nervously. Some whispered, others updated their resumes, and interns started making secret spreadsheets tracking which civil servants were most likely to be doubling as gang accountants. Task teams that used to disappear mysteriously had vanished officially, leaving nothing behind but a memo that said, dissolved, no questions asked. Financial misconduct, witness intimidation, and procedural chaos had become standard operating procedure. Reality was stranger than fiction. Mkhwanazi's testimony was the perfect mix of bluntness and clarity. He didn't need metaphors, he didn't need drama, just facts delivered with precision. The political killings task team, meant to protect citizens from politically motivated murders, had been erased with a bureaucratic flourish. Criminal influence wasn't hidden, it was visible, organized, and in a twisted way, kinda efficient. The state wasn't infiltrated. It was partnered with the criminals in a long-term contract that apparently nobody read. Public reactions were, predictably, a mix of laughter and horror. Social media exploded with memes showing officials measuring bribes with rulers and congratulating each other on best organized embezzlement. Citizens suddenly felt seen. Finally, someone had articulated what everyone had already suspected, that corruption is not a glitch in the system, but the system itself. Mkhwanazi's testimony cut through the usual fog. He spoke plainly, naming structural failures, disbanded task teams, and the ease with which criminal syndicates had embedded themselves in the state. There was no theater, no spin, just facts. As hearings continued, Mkhwanazi's observations remained sharp. He detailed procedural breaches, highlighted political interference, and described a state where corruption was routine, normalized, and occasionally celebrated. Witnesses feared reporting crimes, investigations stalled, and financial misconduct thrived. Ordinary citizens watching at home could nod knowingly. They had seen this in their own lives. Reality, in its ordinary absurdity, had become satire. Even as the ad hoc committee deliberated, the public had already understood the punchline. The criminals weren't outsiders. They were running the show. Task teams vanished with official memoranda. Bribery and intimidation became standard, and chaos was systematized. South Africans found themselves laughing at the grotesque predictability of their governance while grimly realizing there was nothing funny about their own safety and finances. Ultimately, Mkhwanazi's disclosures were a masterclass in understated bravery. Malema's nod underscored the rarity of the moment. Even in a swamp of spin and political theater, honesty could be recognized and applauded. For citizens, the takeaway was clear. The mafia didn't sneak in. They applied, interviewed, and got promoted. For politicians, the message was equally stark. Speaking the truth can, at least briefly, pierce the fog of corruption. Mkhwanazi didn't reform the state overnight, but he provided a blueprint for accountability. His testimony wasn't dramatic fiction. It was the daily reality dressed in parliamentary language. Citizens could finally see the system for what it was. Criminalized governance, task teams erased with bureaucratic efficiency, and truth treated as a revolutionary act. The satire was inherent in the ordinariness, corruption redecorated instead of eradicated, and courage recognized as exceptional simply because it existed. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi became more than a police commissioner. He became a mirror to a state comfortable with corruption. His courage, amplified by Malema's rare acknowledgement, revealed the grotesque normality of criminalized governance. South Africans watched, laughed, and winced. In Pretoria, the most radical act wasn't a policy reform or a grand speech. It was simply telling the truth. If you think Nigerian innovation stopped at Nollywood, wait until you hear about Uche, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, or former by now, who turned forgery into a scientific discipline. In October, he resigned 3 days after Premium Times revealed that his university degree and NYSC certificate were as authentic as a WhatsApp prophecy. The man responsible for national innovation had innovated himself, printing a fake University of Nigerian Nsukka degree and an NYSC certificate so sloppy, even Photoshop wanted deniability. UNN and NYSC both swore they'd never heard of him, a first in a country where everyone knows someone who knows someone in admissions. Naji's resume, it turns out, was the work of speculative fiction. Appointed in 2023, doubted in 2024, exposed in 2025, he was essentially a pilot project for academic counterfeiting. When confronted, Naji blamed political enemies, the Nigerian politician's equivalent of claiming that Mercury was in retrograde. He resigned without admitting guilt, leaving behind a ministry now qualified to research the chemistry of deceit. Opposition leaders pounced faster than an EFCC agent on a press conference. Atiku Abubakar demanded prosecution, while Ruben Abati called it intellectual fraud, the kind of elegant insult you use when idiot won't fit in a headline. Nigerians, meanwhile, treated the scandal with wary amusement. Another day, another fake degree, another minister who studied in the University of WhatsApp, another Oluwale. The Tinubu administration, already carrying more academic baggage than universities' libraries, scrambled for damage control. But the damage was already a meme. Social media dubbed him Dr. Cut and Paste, complete with a fake graduation photo in Canva regalia. Under the law, forgery carries a 21-year sentence, but in Nigerian politics, it carries probably a promotion, assuming you fake the right signatures. Naji's fall didn't cause outrage. It caused deja vu. The country that invented miracle centers for exams now had one in government. His resignation was not accountability, no, it was intermission before the next scandal. In a perverse way, Naji did fulfill his job description. He merged innovation and deception so seamlessly that future scammers may cite him as a pioneer. Nigeria's greatest export remains irony, and its latest product was a minister whose science was fiction, whose innovation was imitation, and whose legacy is proof that in the Federal Republic of Credentials, the most powerful lab is still Microsoft Word. In Madagascar, President Andry Rajoelina has finally promised power, or a resignation notice. After weeks of protests over blackouts and dry taps left 22 people dead, the DJ turned president declared on 8 October 2025 that if power cuts persist within a year, he will step down. It was a bold vow from the same man who once seized power in 2009 with a protest playlist. 15 years later, the beat's gone and the crowd wants a refund. Rajoelina told supporters he wanted truth, not flattery, which in Malagasy politics means don't boo too loudly. He blamed previous officials for promising normalcy, though by now normal in Madagascar means one working street light per neighborhood and a government running on battery saver mode. He promised to add 265 megawatts to the grid with World Bank funds, but his citizens, now experts in candlelight economics, were not impressed. The Gen Z mother movement gave him 48 hours to resign. Because when a generation raised on TikTok protests, patience is capped at 60 seconds. Rajoelina responded by firing his cabinet and appointing a general as prime minister, because nothing says let's fix power like military intervention. He accused the youth of plotting a coup, apparently forgetting that was his own career starter pack. The irony could light up the capital if only irony produced voltage. The country's water crisis has villagers walking miles for buckets, while corruption ensures pipelines exist only on paper. Foreign investors watch nervously as the president oscillates between populism and paranoia, while protesters chant for light jobs and leadership that doesn't require a generator. Rajoelina's one-year ultimatum feels less like accountability and more like a hostage note to himself. The promise of electricity has become the new campaign hymn. Every president sings it. None ever plug in the mic. His gamble might buy him time, but not trust. The youth have discovered that you can't charge hope with promises, and if he survives the storm, it won't be because the light stayed on. It will be because the people got too tired to protest in the dark. Madagascar's future now flickers between revolution and blackout, and Rajoelina, ever the showman, is discovering that ruling without power makes for the worst kind of encore. Go DJ. That's my DJ. All the best, Rajalina. In Tanzania, 2025 brought a chilling sequel to the country's unfinished trilogy of fear, The Disappearing of Critics, now streaming live on the state's favorite platform, Denial Plus. The latest episode stars Humphrey Polepole, the former ambassador to Cuba turned inconvenient truth-teller who vanished from his Dar es Salaam home on 6 October 2025 in a production that spared no expense on realism, broken doors, cut wires, bloodstains, and enough tension to qualify as horror cinema. His mother, trembling before the microphones, whispered, "They should not throw him into the sea." A line so chilling it deserves its own memorial plaque. Polepole had resigned in July after revealing tales of corruption, intimidation, and state surveillance that made even Kafka's ghost sigh in recognition. Before he could appear for police questioning, someone else apparently expedited the process. The Tanzanian way of saying, "You're under house arrest, but we've removed the house." Police Chief Jumane Muliro, perhaps auditioning for stand-up, told journalists that Polepole often claimed to be abroad, implying the disappearance was his side hustle. In Tanzania, being missing has become the new entrepreneurship, apparently. Government spokesperson David Mesime confirmed an investigation but urged the family to clarify their claims on social media. You know, nothing says justice like crowdsourcing your own rescue. Lawyers rushed to file a habeas corpus plea, the legal equivalent of shouting into a well, while Amnesty International and the Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition demanded answers from a government that pretends not to hear. With elections on 29 October this month, the timing feels less like coincidence and more like choreography. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, once hailed as the calm after Magufuli storm, now seems to have borrowed his toolbox, only swapping bulldozers for bureaucracy. The ruling CCM, true to its branding, continues its disappearing democracy campaign, now available in high-definition fear. Citizens whisper like extras in a spy film, and journalists publish at the speed of courage, fast but never loud. The irony? Tanzania still hosts press freedom conferences, proving you can celebrate liberties long after they're gone, like a national ghost festival. The police insist they're following leads, which in local translation means waiting for the story to fade. Polepole's absence, like those before him, exposes a state allergic to accountability yet addicted to control. Even government supporters now pray under their breath, not for justice, but for silence to be enough protection. Tanzania's democracy once walked proudly. Today it tiptoes barefoot through a minefield, hoping the next critic's disappearance will at least make better headlines. Freedom of speech still exists. It just comes with a disappearing act, and the applause is always shaky and nervous. In Tunisia, where the Arab Spring once bloomed with promises of liberty, 2025 has arrived like a cynical gardener uprooting the last flower for national security reasons. The spectacle began when Saba Choshane, a 56-year-old laborer and part-time Facebook philosopher, was sentenced to death for typing what millions think but dare not post. His weapon of mass destruction? A keyboard. His ammunition? Sarcasm. His crime? Daring to suggest online that President Kais Saied might not be the second coming of competence. The Nabil court, apparently inspired by ancient pharaohs, decided that insulting the president equaled assaulting the state. Because in Tunisia, egos are now part of national infrastructure. The ruling struck like lightning, though the country's electricity bills are too high to confirm that. Lawyer Osama Boltelia called the verdict astonishing. while Amnesty International used diplomatic restraint to describe it as a serious precedent, which is NGO code for "this is absolute bonkers madness." Sayed, the law professor turned philosopher king, found himself mocked globally for executing Facebook users while inflation executed families. By 6 October, just 4 days later, Shoshané was miraculously pardoned. Proof that in Tunisia, divine mercy travels faster than due process. His lawyer withdrew the appeal to allow the pardon, as though salvation now requires administrative choreography. The absurdity deepens with Decree 54, the anti-fake news law that's become a tool for harvesting citizens like bad tweets. Under its logic, posting memes might soon qualify as high treason. Tunisia's joke that to survive online you must log in as anonymous, praise Sayed thrice, and end with "long live the truth" as defined by the presidency. The president, who campaigned on restoring dignity, has turned it into a loyalty card program. Critic once and you're cancelled. Praise twice and you might keep Wi-Fi. Shoshané's pardon was no act of grace. It was panic disguised as mercy, authoritarianism in a lab coat and pretending to be humane. Sayed, who lectures on law, now governs like a man allergic to it, editing Tunisia's constitution as if it were a Wikipedia article. The world sees the irony. A country that once sparked a regional revolution now fears a middle-aged man's Facebook status. Tunisia hasn't executed anyone since 1991, but apparently democracy itself is on death row. The government's new motto might as well read, "Think before you post, or we'll think for you." For a nation that ignited the Arab Spring, it's an incredible plot twist. From revolution to retribution, from freedom to filters. The final moral? In Sayed's Tunisia, it's not your post that kills you. It's the government's need to prove it's still in control of the Wi-Fi. Africa is not broken. It is betrayed again and again by men and women who mistake leadership for inheritance and patriotism for PR. South Africa's Mkhwanazi stood before Parliament and told the truth like a man lighting a candle in a hurricane, not to illuminate the darkness, but to prove light still exists. Nigeria's Naji built a ministry on counterfeit credentials and left behind a masterclass in what happens when qualification is replaced by confidence. Madagascar's Rajolina played DJ with democracy, promising power while remixing excuses. Tanzania's ghosts continue to vanish in broad daylight, and Tunisia, once the birthplace of rebellion, now punishes jokes with death sentences. 5 nations, 1 diagnosis. Power in Africa does not corrupt, it advertises. But satire's cruelest joke is this: it's not just about them, it's about us. We, the audience, who clap when corruption sings our favorite tune. We who whisper, "That's how things are," as if despair were a tradition. We who scroll past the news and call it peace. Second Take is not a mirror for our laughter, it's a mirror for our complicity. Every scandal has a crowd that looked away first. Every tyrant has a people who decided survival was easier than principle. Still, Africa refuses to surrender her humor. She jokes even when bleeding, because humor is truth disguised as oxygen. It keeps us breathing in the smoke of governance gone wrong. Mkhwanazi's courage reminds us that integrity is not extinct, only endangered. Naji's forgery shows that even the smartest thief can't fake conscience. Rajolina's promise teaches that electricity without honesty still leaves you in the dark. Pole Pole's disappearance reminds us that the most dangerous profession in Africa is remembering. And Shoshané's keyboard rebellion proves that tyranny trembles before even the smallest dose of courage. These are not stories of failure. They are stories of endurance, of citizens who laugh, rage, march, and meme their way through absurdity because giving up is simply not an option. Power thinks satire mocks it, but satire mourns what power destroys: trust, dignity, hope. We do not mock Africa, we defend her by refusing to pretend she's fine. So what do we do now, after the laughter fades? We remember. We refuse to normalize madness. We hold on to the stubborn idea that Africa deserves leaders who don't need satire to remind them of their job description. Because when truth becomes dangerous, comedy becomes sacred. Africa's story is not written in the halls of power, it's written in the patience of her people. Every protester who chants, every journalist who writes, every teacher who still believes in tomorrow, they are the authors of our unfinished miracle. And if you're watching this, if you're laughing and thinking at once, then you're part of that rebellion too. This is Second Take, where humor is the last honest language left standing, and Africa, in all her bruised brilliance, still deserves a standing ovation. Good night.